you're on stage live.
Okay. Well, you guys have a little bit of background on me. I can give an update since that last video. Just give you guys some reference. So first of all, thank you for having us and spending some time. It's going to be fun. So as of last year, so I was working at Newell Brands, and right before the pandemic, I made the great decision of going out on my own and starting my own consulting, which was not the best timing. But honestly, it all worked out really well. So the end of last year, companies have been picking up. I think what happened was a lot of these companies were holding off on their innovation development. They were trying to wait and see if we could outpace or overcome the pandemic and get back to work. But that wasn't happening, and companies felt like they needed to fill their product pipelines and start creating product again, or else they're going to have lapse in market. So the end of last year, things started to turn around, and 2021 is, I think, seen a lot of growth from companies. There's a lot of investment. So things are changing and things are getting better. I'm sure you can speak from the Bose standpoint as well, but it seems like things are getting a lot better out there from a corporate standpoint. They're investing knowing that, 2021 is coming around the corner, or the end of 2021, they need to still launch product. 2022, same thing. So things are looking good. So I started my own consulting last year, and then I also started a podcast as well around ID. I think it's important to, grow our community and all have conversations around industrial design and, some of those topics that aren't necessarily brought up or talked about all the time. I think it's just good to have a sounding board and a way to, all communicate and help each other. I think it's, industrial design is a small community of people. When you get out there, it's actually, it's one of those smaller industries. So just having a way to connect and help each other out, I think is so critical, especially when you go through situations like 2020. So that kind of led me to develop out a podcast as well. So that's been a kind of an update, just a quick overview. And you've probably heard enough of my voice from the last video you saw. So I'll let Crystal.
Of course, Crystal, before you start to talk, I also advise the students that they can ask a question anytime instead to go at the end. So let's try to keep as interactive as possible. Thank you.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Any questions for Craig before I go?
I was curious what the name of the podcast is.
It's called Exploded View, and it's on Spotify and iTunes. And I came up with the name, and I was like, I got to do a podcast now. I just
creative.
It had to exist.
Craig, are you familiar with the other podcast? It's Lens.
Yep. Yeah, Lens. Yeah. I've spoken to them quite a bit. They have a good group of people all kind of working together on Lens, and it's been an inspiration. Same with Minor Details. If you guys are looking for other podcasts to check out, that's another good one. There's a couple that are kind of have formed around.
Eventually, you can type in the chat if you want.
Okay, yeah, I'll send those along.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So a little bit about me. I also graduated from CCS in product design. I graduated in 2009, which was not the greatest time to graduate because of the recession. So, I thankfully did learn enough at CCS to, persevere through it. And I think, we're going through similar times right now. And, it just kind of just keep going. And that was what I had to do. And, it was almost 2 years before I could find a job because the job market was so bad, but just know that you have the skill set and to just keep pushing is really important. But after those 2 years, I got my first job at Tecna, which is a small design consultancy out in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I moved out there and, I was hired as an industrial designer and that's what I did. But it being a consultancy, I got to do many different roles because you really have to be a jack of all trades when you're working at a small consultancy. So I started to pick up more projects that were more color, material, finish focused and trend focused. And so I organically found my way into that role and really loved it. And so started searching for a job as a CMF designer. So after 3 years at Tecna, I went literally 2 doors down to Newell Brands. They're design headquartered in Kalamazoo as well, where I worked there for 5.5 years, and I worked on many different brands from Rubbermaid to Contigo and Bubba, water bottles, Coleman a little bit, fine luxury pens. I've done that. I've done Calphalon. There's probably a lot more I've worked on. Baby gear, like Graco is another one. So I've probably worked on over 10 brands while I was at Newell, which was great because you don't really get that kind of experience when you're at a company unless you're at a large conglomerate like that. So you get to learn all these different materials and manufacturing techniques, and each brand has its nuances that you really have to be tuned into, which was really important. So after about 5.5 years there, we eventually moved to New York City. Newell had opened a small design satellite in Hoboken, right across the river. So we lived in New York for probably about 3 years. And then I got the job at Bose as the CMF design lead, which is where I'm at now. I've been there about 1.5 years, and it's once again very different than the products Newell was. It's a premium audio brand, so the materials that I get to work on are at higher cost targets, higher price points, which is really great. And I'd say throughout your careers, try to find, that variety to really keep you well-versed and diversified as a designer is only going to make you more valuable throughout your whole career. So that's kind of my whole story.
I have a question that probably a lot of them they may have. Going from one company to the other, did you send application or you were contacted by those companies?
I sent applications for all of them. I've been contacted by headhunters for big tech companies, but just timing never worked out. But it's usually me applying, or also like at Bose, I interned at Bose while I was at CCS. So I had contacts there and had reached out to them, and said, hey, I saw this position. I'm going to apply. And, they kind of help you along. And I think that's really important to build those relationships. Like what Craig was saying, design's a really small community. And so you don't know what relationship you're going to build now that might help you in the future. And that's really important.
Very good. While you were at CCS, you talk about this Bose internship. Have you done any other internship or sponsor projects?
That was my only internship. I did one sponsored project, which was Motorola. Maybe I'm aging myself a bit with that one, but that was my only sponsored studio. And then, yeah, I think that was it.
I think I had one with Tecna, actually, oddly enough. Yeah, I had one with Tecna. And then I think there was a Nike sponsored studio as well. But actually, I didn't have any internship, which was pretty wild for the time. My internship didn't start until after college. After I graduated, I took an internship because of the economy and where it was at the time. So as Crystal described, we're graduating in a rough time. And I feel like, those rough times seem to keep happening a little bit more frequently. And so, I ended up taking the internship because I felt like, just getting the experience and getting my foot in the door was the most important thing. Luckily, that led to a position at a company called Think Labs. But yeah, it was a struggle. And, I had these questions going through my head when I didn't get an internship during school, but, it all works out in the end. So it's just one of those things you got to keep moving forward, keep trying, and eventually things work out when you do keep putting yourself out there, continue to have the passion for the work, and things will come along.
I think to build on it too, even though you didn't have an internship, you still entered competitions. You still,
that's true.
So I think that is important because internships do help. I mean, it does go a long way, but if you're not able to get one, still, using your design skills in some way, whether it's a design competition or, maybe there's a local community, you know, something or other that you could help with, or still flex your design skills in another way to show that you're using it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Greg, when did you graduate? Which year was that?
2008.
2008. Okay.
Right in the 2008 crisis. Perfect timing again.
Please ask questions. I have so many. I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, I think if there's one other thing that I want to talk about, because I think it's really important, it's something Crystal and I both learned at the last job that we were at, was something called the 3 portfolios, which, did I go over that in the last video? I don't want to like repeat. I forget, the video was a little while ago. But the 3 portfolios is something we learned at a company at Newell, and Nate Young heads up that design group. And it was always fascinating to hear what he had to say. And that 3 portfolios, I think, changed my perspective. We always think about the portfolio as the, you know, a culmination of the work that you've been doing, but the 3 portfolio really speaks to kind of a broader designer. And so the 3 portfolios are: 1, it's your process; 2, it's your actual work; and 3, it's your character. So each one of those is what a company looks at when they go to hire you. And I think each one of those are important. And if you have 2 out of the 3, it's not enough. So for instance, if you have good character and good work, but you don't have a good process and ethic about the way that you go about the work, it's going to be very hard to succeed. Same thing as if, you know, you have a great process and, you know, your character is good, but the work's is lacking. You know, that's something that you need to focus on and build up. And I think it's always interesting to think about your own, reflecting constantly on your own 3 portfolios. Are you somebody that people really want to work with? You know, and do you have that good character? Is your work ethic really strong and you're cranking out really talented and quality work? And are you always reflecting and building on your process, whether that's new tools, you know, listening to presentations online and kind of learning new ways of going about the process. So I think those things are really critical. So I'd you know, say to reflect on those 3 portfolios. It's something that really helped me in my career.
Yeah.
You know, same thing for Crystal too.
Yeah, it's really being a holistic, well-rounded designer is important. You know, and with it being a very competitive field, you know, what's going to set you apart? Because there's a lot of great sketchers. There's a lot of great, you know, people who can render really well. And, you know, you want to try to differentiate yourself and set yourself above the rest. And that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah.
I have some question, but before to move to the important one, it means when you decide to start to create your own company, and what are the level complexity? Because I think that a lot of students, they have this interest in their mind. I always suggest to start to work for someone and to build confidence, credibility, and network before to do that. But before to arrive to that question, that will be next. Another one, you know, easy kind of gossip. You start your relation as a student. How you manage the fact that you were students together and then one following the other, one was moving. How is it possible to keep a relation?
That's the juicy stuff.
Yeah. I was the one always moving.
This is something that I think a lot of people worry. Oh my God, if I get this, I will leave my boyfriend, girlfriend, and then we will split. So how you manage?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it definitely took work at the beginning, that's for sure. But you find a way, and you have patience above all else. And then in terms of working together, because we did work together at Newell, you have to, on some level, compartmentalize, you know, your personal life with your work life. And I think in many ways, though, it was our strength, because we could collaborate really closely on design process. And it was almost, because we know each other so well, it created a really great synergy. You know, especially as we moved to the advanced design team at Newell, me being in CMF and him being in industrial design. But you know, I think it's always important to have patience and trust, and then just leave it at home. Like, that's the other thing, is you have to be professional above all else when you work together and you're in a relationship. But it can work. It just takes a lot of communication, a lot of patience, and trust. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say trust is probably the biggest thing.
What happened if, and it happened to you, some of you, one of you get a job somewhere else, so how you take a decision? So and you did for Kalamazoo, and then New York, you were together, that doesn't count. But then Boston, what happened? You know, we want to know behind the scene, because this is something that can be interesting to a lot of the students that you have in this.
Yeah. So the Boston thing was kind of like a good coincidence, because Craig's always talked about starting his own business. And with us moving on from Newell and me getting the job at Bose and having to move to Boston, it allowed him to do that. It was giving him the freedom, and me having the full-time job, to be able to do that, because there is a level of security that is needed on some level. And then, you know, I have promised him that we're not going to move for a little bit, so I am kind of stuck here now. But yeah, you kind of just find a way. And then when I was in Kalamazoo, we took turns. He'd drive out one weekend, I'd drive out the next weekend. And
yeah, we were in 2 locations. So I stayed in Detroit because I had my job there, and Crystal was in Kalamazoo. So we did a commute back and forth for about 3 or 4 years, which is like it's a 2.5 hour drive roughly. So we just, we're seeing each other on weekends and stuff, which was pretty wild. But I will also say that patience was part of it too, because we both had the goal of moving to New York at some point. And we actually ended up moving to Kalamazoo before we went to New York. And we had no idea that Newell was going to open up a facility in New York. It was just something that we'd always wanted to do. But, we were patient through it and knew that, we'd get there eventually. And it just so happened that, there was a meeting one day, an all hands meeting, and they announced this new location, and they said they were looking for people to join this, advanced design group and kind of help bring the culture from Kalamazoo to this new facility. And we were one of the first to raise our hands and say that we were, interested in joining that. So I think that's the other side of it too, is having the patience, knowing that you're both kind of working on your career and developing. There's times where, my career is going to have to take the front seat, and there's other times where Crystal's career has to take the front seat, and, and then you kind of build from there. And it's just that balance to make sure that you're both moving and progressing in the directions that you want to, and I'd say the trust as well is
being
critical.
Clear on the goals. We've always said, being designers, you can only work in certain areas. It's not like a teacher or nurse where you could get a job anywhere and live anywhere. There's really a small number of cities that you can live in. So I think it's just really setting those expectations too, and knowing, where do you want to end up? And, granted, things change and you should absolutely be flexible, but I think having a talk about the goals is important too.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer. That send also a positive message. That means for whoever is graduating, never compromise. Try to build to live your life, take the career that you deserve. And if you are in a relation with someone, if it's a good relation, things will happen.
Right.
That is a cool case studies. In my case, I live something very similar, and it's lasting since 42 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there is a path in the family that is going that direction. So, live your life, work on your career, do the stuff that you have to do, stay positive. It's a good relation, nothing changes if for a while there will be a distance between.
Yeah, we're going to have to reach out to you for some advice on that.
We will talk about that.
Yeah.
Now, I think that this is something that a lot of students are asking, and I will ask you on your behalf. This moving from working from before a consultancy, then a corporation, but then this idea to create your own company, the level of difficulty, and the suggestion that you can give, because I'm pretty sure a lot of them have this kind of idea in mind. And if you recommend to start as soon as possible, to do some experience outside, these are all the things that will be important for them to know.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I do dive into this topic for about an hour with Michael DeTullo on an episode. So a little plug there, but I think there's so many good insights in that conversation about how we both started off and developed out our design business. I think it's going to be a different fit for each person. So there's individuals who do start right out of school, but for me, it made the most sense. And, thinking logically through it, I felt like I needed to get some experience in a few different locations before I went out on my own. And Michael DeTullo kind of reflected that as well in our conversation. But this idea that, if you do want to, if your ultimate goal is to start your own consulting business and, potentially hire people out or do consulting, freelancing on the side, I think that type of stuff is important to, get experience at a small consulting firm and just see how it's another way to learn, see how they go about the business. How do they maintain clients? How do they find new clients? How much work and how are they billing out their hours? All those little nuances, you learn so much. And you're getting paid to learn that, knowing that, that might be an eventual goal that you want to, start your own thing. I also wanted to get some experience in a big company too, and just see what are the overall process for a giant corporation. So at a consulting group, one of the things that happens is you might be, creating work, but not all of it goes into production. And sometimes it gets handed off to a large company that's producing the product, and it changes. There's so many changes that happen, and you're always wondering and curious, why did that product not make the market, or why did they make the changes that they did, before they launched it? And so that was part of the reason why I also wanted to go to Newell Brands, because they, I knew that they were going to be cranking out product. That's the way that we all got paid, was they put product on shelf. So seeing that side of the spectrum too, I think was really interesting and very eye-opening for me. So I was in a way collecting these experiences as a way to eventually, go out on my own and start my own thing. So having that background knowledge, there's other people who, it's a passion of theirs and they want to start right out of school. And that's what they do. And some of them are successful at that. And some have to jump into a work career and join a big company and kind of build from there again. So it's always kind of it's a strange thing, but each person's experience is different. Each person's experience to get to their own career and starting their own business is going to be different. If I were to recommend something to somebody who is interested, I would say it's best to build a strong network, because honestly, all the people that I work with right now in my consulting business are people that I've either worked with in the past or have built relationships through my other jobs and my other careers. So it just makes your life so much easier as you go to start selling yourself. When people have already worked and spent a bunch of time, when you've been in the trenches with them developing product, they're more confident in your abilities. You don't have to oversell it. You don't have to sell it. They just want to work with you. And so I think that was a big part of the reason why I wanted to, have that experience with consulting and with the big companies first. But I would recommend jumping on that podcast, and because we go in depth about setting rates, legal side of things, all the kind of ins and outs. And I think it's really helpful if that's something you want to do eventually.
Very good. Thank you. Please, Hugo, you must have a question.
Actually, I did. I just didn't want to interrupt. Actually, this question was for...
I saw your face.
I made the face. For Crystal, I was just curious about timeframes, being at Newell and having that opportunity to work with so many different brands. What do the project timeframes look like versus Bose, which I would imagine spends a little bit more time finessing a particular product before it hits that market? That's
actually a really good question. So I would say the average for Newell was probably 18 months.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably about 18 months. that being said, though, there's certainly projects that were shorter and there were some that were longer. Being on CMF, you know, I'm on the program for quite a while because I have to see it all the way through to like the final product coming off the line, so I can check the colors and make sure they're within the tolerance. But I'd say 18 months is about average. What's interesting about bows, though, is it's about the same. I'd say it's a little shorter, actually, like 12 to 18 months would be the average. But bows is set up so that way, you know, we have the products that launch every year, but because it's a private company, we have the luxury that if there's new technology, we can spend years developing it if we need to. So it's a really great, like, best of both worlds situation. But I've experienced it of all the companies I've worked at, I'd say about 12 to 18 months is average. I do notice that companies are wanting to shorten that timeline and expedite the design process and engineering process and all of that. So we're all being asked to move faster to get products to market faster. And that pressure builds in times like this, where there's a recession or, you know, a pandemic, a once in a lifetime pandemic. But like when companies start to feel that pressure, that's usually when design feels it too.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Eva,
I had a question for you. Yeah. Wow. So this was a question for Crystal as well. I know you've mentioned CMF a few times, and it's something that I'm kind of interested in, but I'm not sure exactly where to look or how to get started in that because it's kind of a new thing for me. So I don't know how you got into it, or if it was something you knew you already wanted to do in college, or just how that happened.
Yeah, another good question. So I didn't really know much about CMF when I was in school. When I was in school, I feel like there wasn't any programs for it, or if there were very few. You know, you guys are lucky enough that CCS does have an MFA program in it now. You know, I would say definitely go talk to Sally, who's I believe still the department chair there for CMF. But it's one of those things that I just honestly researched about, kind of started looking into. It was really weird because I wanted to take all my favorite things from the design process and just do those, which maybe is a little naive at the time, but it did get me, you know, to where I am. And I asked around, like, people I knew who had been working already if they've heard of something like this. But really, CMF follows the similar process as ID. You're just not doing the sketching, the CAD. You still have to do rendering, so you still have to be able to use any of the rendering programs, but you also have to do trend forecasting. You know, you have to really know the properties of the material more, and you have to know rough, like, you know, what you can mold, you know, for that particular part. So there is more detail in that respect. But, you know, I would say now there's a lot more resources. There's more programs for CMF. I think there absolutely could be more. I think more companies are seeing the value of CMF because we can be a low investment asset for them. So if you've already launched a product, it's easy enough to just change the color on it to create a new product. Not trying to oversimplify, there's a lot of work that still goes into that, but it's a lower investment for the company. They don't have to create new tooling. You know, there's not this big R&D investment for a new innovation. So I think more and more companies will continue to see CMF as an asset. But I would say just keep researching, use the people available to you at CCS, you know, contact faculty in the CMF department for the master's program. And, you know, from there, it'll just be a spider web effect. They'll probably be able to connect you to other people. You know, I've given my contact info to Vincenzo, so you can always reach out to me if you have questions. But yeah, I would just say ask questions, you know, keep learning.
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely reach out if I can get your contact info.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. A couple more questions, then we go to the portfolios. Please, take the chance.
I had a question. In your experience with working in both like consultancies and corporations, what was some of the main differences between like the vibe and the design process and workload, and then also like your interaction between other designers and yourself?
It's funny because Craig and I have very different. He loved consultancy world. I hated it. I didn't like it. If I'm being very honest.
How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm being, well, I want to be very transparent because, you know, for me at the time, and it's still, there's work that needs to be done. It's getting better. But for me, having the protection of a big company with an HR department is big, because being a woman in a male-dominated field, there is a need to want to be a part of a group that has diversity, that has representation at every single level. It's a little hard to get that in a consultancy. Not saying it's not possible, because there's certainly amazing consultancies out there that do offer that. But I think for me, having that allyship was really important. Having someone to go talk to in HR, you know, it's one of those really trivial, and I don't want to say trivial, but like things you don't really think about. And so I felt more comfortable at a larger corporation because of that. I also liked that there was more diverse staff that was there working. Another thing, like I mentioned with Newell, like the diversity of projects I got to work on. I mean, I have a roster of launch products that I don't think many CMF designers can attribute to, which is all due to Newell. So, you know, but at the same time, the consultancy, you really learn a lot. The consultancy is responsible for the nitty gritty, like making stuff happen. I don't know, maybe you can offer more on the consultancy side.
Yeah, I feel like if part of your interest is on the business side of design, I think that's where a consultancy can really play a role in teaching you and educating you on the business side, because you can be part of the conversations around building a quote for a project, or like, you know, building out a project team. You do wear a lot of hats, as Crystal said. While you're at a consultancy, you might work on some of the branding work, some of the UI. You're kind of all over the map because there's a limited number of resources, and you kind of all play a role in the development of the project. You know, at launch, though, to Crystal's point, and kind of what I was saying earlier, you don't always see those products launch and go to market as you design them or as you handed them off. So the consultancies sometimes are just setting an overall either aesthetic or a direction, you know, pulling in some of the consumer insights and trying to frame out the entirety of the project for a big company to then take and move to production. So those products you don't always see. It depends on where you go, but you don't always see those hit the market. But you're also getting a ton of experience in, you know, learning how to, you know, build those relationships with the customer as well. That business side, like I said. So I think there's benefits to the consultancy from that standpoint too. But I honestly enjoyed both the large corporation and the consultancy for different reasons. You know, in the large corporation, you do get that larger sense of community. I think the question is also about, you know, your relationships. We worked in a building with, I think there was 120 people.
I think it was more by the time we left. It was near 100, and there's easily over 150 designers in one building.
And there was still kind of this family mentality at Newell, where you have so many different designers all working together, and you're all kind of heading towards a similar goal. So I wouldn't say that your relationships change much. It's all about the culture within the company too. Sometimes the fit of the culture just doesn't work, and it could be either bad at a big company, even in a small company. So I think it depends. And if you're not feeling like you're supported wherever you are, I think it's time to move on. You know, companies don't deserve to keep talent if they're not building a strong culture and supporting one another and building a diverse team, as Crystal said. I think that's a big signal to move on, because you could have a great culture in both a small consultancy and a big company.
I'd say the 3 portfolios applies to companies too.
Yep.
They need to have that, you know, process. They need to have the character. You know, I think that's all really important. as well. And when you're interviewing at a company, ask them the questions. You know, it's a two-way street in an interview. Don't be scared to ask them very direct questions and poignant questions that get at the heart of, you know, you figuring out if the company is the right fit for you. So it's not just are you a right fit for them, you know, and them asking all the questions. It's a two-way thing. So don't be scared to ask them, you know, questions that are important to you, because you do, you know, you want to feel comfortable there.
Last question, then we move. If there are no questions, I have one that can be quick for Crystal. So at Newell, you were working on a variety of products. At Bose, probably you are working on one or two. Is that true? And how you live that?
I would say I was working on a lot more products at Newell at one time because I went across multiple brands. And I find that pretty frequent with CMF in general is you have to support, you know, across many different programs because they are typically smaller teams. But I've seen, you know, with industrial designers, they'll get like one or two projects that they got to maintain, whereas I have to at minimum maintain like 6 or 7 at any given time. So being organized is extremely important. It's not one of like the sexier parts of the design process, but it is extremely important. You know, Bose still has a lot of projects going on right now. I'd say I probably have about 6 on my plate right now that I'm overseeing.
Okay, good. Very good. I think that now we should move on because there are 3 portfolios. I asked to the students to be on stage for maximum 8 minutes. And I was defining to have the 3 presentations, the 3 of them presenting, and then overall general comments to their portfolio, inspired by their portfolio, but something, of course, can be important and interesting for everyone. So this is the purpose of this meeting. So if everybody agree, without further ado, we proceed with the first one that can be Michaela. So we go in the order Michaela, John, and Alexis. Sounds good? Remember the 8 minutes. It's a system that we create, you know. And I also send the link to Craig and Crystal, so they have, I hope that you have the time for overview in case you have done. If not, you know, it will be live. Michaela, I allow you to share the screen. Go for it.
Okay. Okay, are we all set?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I'm Michaela Mancini, and this is my design portfolio. I have a few projects, studio projects that I'll go over first, and then just some VisCom and 3D modeling projects I've done. My first project was a sponsored studio with Generac that we designed a generator. They had asked us to do some of our own research and focus on the coastal areas and natural disaster relief. And so upon my research and looking into generators, I found that some of the main issues were safety issues that seemed to be driven by like human error. And those 2 main ones were that the generator was catching fire due to the user trying to fill it while it was either running or while it was still hot. And they were doing this because they want to keep their house plugged in, like all their appliances still running, and they don't want to have that wait time. And the other issue was that people were running their generators in their garages or sometimes even in their houses. Even though there's a ton of warning labels of carbon monoxide poisoning and death, these labels all tend to camouflage together and become really busy, and you look them over and don't actually read the fine print. And so I felt that a cover would give the user that confidence, and I wanted to solve for these issues through design and not just with slapping more labels on there. So I started to explore that by incorporating a cover with the generator. And my first idea was like this clamshell that would have a silicone sheet that would roll out and clip around it. My solution for the generator catching fire was to make the gas tank modular so that you would have to remove it in order to fill it, but also giving you convenience of a bigger tank and being able to not having to have the extra cans, because those tend to run out in a hurricane or natural disaster. So this is my final design. That's what it looks like. The cover, I ended up putting it on the side so it would roll out. I found that I didn't need nearly as much of that silicone sheet as I thought. And then this gives the user the ability to mess with the engine or do their own maintenance as they would like, giving them that individuality and power to, or the independence to use their own machine. With the gas tank, I have it so it's easily rolls up next to your generator. You tilt it back, and like I showed down the bottom there, once those wheels are over that bar, you push it back into place and the handle snaps down, keeping it there. And I also made it so that there would be a battery reserve so that before you remove the gas tank, you don't have to turn it off, you just switch it to the battery. And you've got about an hour to either go refuel that tank or switch it out with a different one that you've purchased after the fact. And since I did design for safety, I put a few other little safety things in there. I placed the outlets on the opposite side of the fuel tank on purpose so that it's away from any fumes and avoiding any sparks. I put another weather protector silicone sheet on that backside, and then that front panel, instead of leaving it blank or an open space, it's a metal sheet to also hold that tank in place, but to keep it protected from the weather in case, or when you don't have that tank there. And that is my generator. My next project was a bed that I designed. The studios for small living or tiny homes. I kind of focused on like a studio apartment. And when looking into the issues with small living, found that the main thing that we're lacking is like surface spaces and places to do our work and crafts and maybe our hobbies. And I found that the biggest waste of space or dead space in our house is our beds most of the time. And during the day, I wanted to be able to convert that sleep space into a workspace, giving you those additional surfaces that you can also fold up and when you are not using them. And the way that I did that, I built the headboard to be able to fold down, pull it out, giving you more space. And the footboard does something similar. I designed that track as well, that the footboard slides up on it and is able to fold over your bed and bedding. So you don't even necessarily have to make your bed. There's space underneath it to just kind of forget what's underneath it and give you table space above the bed. Also, storage is super important when living in a small space. So I gave it the feature of more storage spaces underneath, but also these chests to be able to pull out and becomes a bench seat, but also you can purchase more of them and put them in the other slots. And then just some additional features, just some the individually controlled headlight or night lights and charging stations, and then a motion censored light on underneath the frame, so that when you wake up, you don't have to wake up your partner as well, just illuminates the floor. Just an orthographic explaining what that all looked like. And then this is just like how I explored converting that bed space into surface space, different ideas I had of how to get there. My next project is called Truck Tech. I designed a winter cleat that is, the cleats are retractable with a hands-free mechanism. We originally designed this for elders in mind, but it's also a product that can basically be used by anyone. How it works, you apply it the same way you do like the Yak Track rubber soles. You can stretch that rubber over any of your everyday shoes. And then the little lever on the back is how you use your toe to push up or lift down that, that lever in the back to retract those spikes. I designed the outsole to be similar tread of a tennis shoe, so that once those spikes are folded in and you walk into the grocery store or church, wherever you're going, that's going to be either hardwood floors or laminate floors. The spikes are going to be really slippery on there. So that's why it's important to be able to retract it without your hands, to be able to walk into that building and still have that normal tread that your tennis shoe would give you. I gave it an elastic band across your Achilles there to fit comfortably out around any shoe, and also to be able to, that's where you would grab it and pull it up onto your shoe. And then the retraction lever, I gave it a little, some traction for your toe to be able to lift and push down on it. And then I just show what that mechanism actually looks like inside of the rubber there. It's made out of like a thin metal that's gonna be flexible, and then a flexible wire cable in the middle where your arch is, giving you more movability. And then those rods sit in those grooves, being able to rotate back and forth.
8 minutes, go quick.
Oh,
finish.
Sorry. And then I was inspired by the way that brakes on skis work and a retractable hairbrush. Go through that. And then this is just a flash drive I did. I gave it a paper clip mechanism so that instead of clipping it onto a keychain, you clip it onto your paperwork. And then this is a watch that I did, just making a more thin and elegant, feminine watch instead of the more bulky round ones. And then just a shoe that I was recently working on, 2 shoes that I was asked to design, a more feminine tennis shoe and then a more gender neutral everyday shoe. And then just some illustrations I've done in the past. And that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Michaela. Sorry, I should keep track of time. Craig, this is the formula of the Student Merit Award, you know, the 7 minutes and then the students are kicked out. So, and I think this is also part of the experience that everybody should be able to do, to present the work in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, or eventually the elevator pitch to catch the essence, and then elevator, what are you doing in 30 seconds to catch the attention of the audience. So this is part of the exercise. So I hope you took some notes, and then we will talk overall feedback at the end. Thank you, Michaela. Now we go to the second one, is John.
Thanks, Michaela.
Thank you.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So I'm John, and this is my design portfolio. Starting off with the table of contents, I have 5 projects in this portfolio. So the first one is called Sound. The second is Play. The third is a Nike concept shoe. Then I have a recliner chair and a cologne project. So starting with Sound, it's a collection of speakers inspired by classic design. So this is the inspiration, looking at metal, wood, and natural colors to inspire the feel of the product. So then I go into the logo. So the logo is comprised of the S from Sound, sound waves themselves, and the U and N, and that's how I got that sort of symbol for the design of the logo. Then I have some sketches. And then this is the final design of the 4 speakers. And then I go into an app that works hand in hand with the speakers and allows you to pair, and some more of the app. And then this is just sort of a final shot showing the scale of the products. So Play is a modern architectural playset that's built to last a lifetime. So just looking at current play sets, I found that they really all look the same, and they didn't have that modern look that a lot of people are looking for in their backyard. So I was inspired by the bright colors, you know, oranges and wood details. So then these are the materials that I chose that are really long lasting. So it has a standing seam roof, fiber cement siding, composite decking, and teak wood for the railing. Some ideation sketches. And then this is the final design. So I go into the different play features that it has. So it has a fireman's pole, swings, a slide, and monkey bars underneath. And then this just goes over all the different finishes throughout the product. And it's sort of a little final shot showing the kids playing on it. So this is my Nike concept project. So it's a modern take on Nikes from the 1970s. So I looked at the shoes that Nike produced in the 1970s and took different aspects of them to integrate into a more modern shoe. Some sketches. Then I have a lateral view, the medial view, and a bottom view. So Recline is a recliner chair that's designed specifically for the elderly. So looking at the target market, looking at the elderly, really looking at the fact that they need assistance when they're standing up and sitting down in the chair. So more about the problem of them having a hard time standing up, sitting down, needing assistance either from a walker or a cane or even another person to help them. So I was inspired by these three sort of famous chairs from the past. And then I have the ideation. I went into some like 8th scale study models, sort of refining the concept. And then this is the final design. And then this shows the different features. So the armrest folds out and creates sort of a side table. And then a second arm raises from the armrest, which allows it to be easier to stand up. There's easy controls built right into the armrest. And then it just has your standard reclining features. And then this sort of shows how that second arm comes out of the chair to assist with this standing up and sitting down for the elderly. I looked at some different material and finishes. And then I did a final model, which is a quarter scale just made out of yellow foam. And then the final project is Stack, which is a personal fragrance project. So I just looked at some of the current bottles that were on the market. And then it was really inspired by watches and watch crowns more specifically. The material and finishes, so it has sort of a matte gunmetal body and then a stainless steel cap similar to the watches that we were looking at before. I did a little bit of branding, so just showcasing the label a little bit. Some quick ideation, the caps. And then this is the final design sketched out. I did a little advertisement that gives you a little bit of a feel of the product. And then this is sort of the finished product. And then a final shot of it. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well done.
Thanks, John.
It's a kind of dry to jump from one presentation to the other, but I think it would be nice to get all the feedback at the end. You, Craig and Krista, please take notes.
We are.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so we move to the last one. There's Alexis.
Okay, hello. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Sorry, let me minimize this. Okay. Okay, so hello. My name is Alexis DiMaggila, and as an introduction of who I am, I'm a product design major and fashion accessories minor as a junior. So in my portfolio, I have 4 projects, and the first one that I'm going to be talking about is Eden, which is an indoor gardening system that I designed. The main purpose for this product is to create a garden hub that fits inside a home interior. Basically, I wanted to create a way for people to produce quality food within their own home without having to go grocery shopping so often. Some of the data that supports this is that it's really good for personal well-being, and reducing the carbon footprint is much more eco-friendly than driving and going to get all of your groceries, as well as all of the manufacturing and the loading that you have to do to transport all these goods to all these grocery stores and restaurants, as well as mental health. Gardening is just a great way to exercise this positive environment, and just promotes good mental exercise. With this product, I wanted to use hydroponics, which is a really great way to grow plants. It's cleaner and it just uses water. And this is kind of like what it looks like as like the system. The final direction that I chose was to use this kind of like pillar structure with some hydroponic pods that come out of the actual product. And that's how you would harvest your food. So some final shots of it. This is what it looks like. It comes in 3 different colorways. And the slogan I came up with was bringing the outdoors in. These are some of the glamour shots. So this is the internal system. Each tray has a different amount of hydropods per tray so that you can harvest different types of plants, whether it's bigger or smaller. It has this really sleek glass door. And there's also a function where you can hide the transparency of what's inside using smart glass. And it is a 360 degrees all the way around glass door. There's LED lighting, which is customizable for each tier so that each plant is getting the proper amount of light for it to grow. And then these are the hydropods that you'd be extracting from the actual garden hub. And they just look like this. You pop it out and then you would just harvest the food from there. These are, since I was talking about I wanted it to fit in different interiors, there's different colorways to fit your home. And yes, so the next project that I have was my first sponsored studio last year. It's called Harmony Hub, and it's a mobility service station for Detroit residents. So the main objective was to empower the minority community because Detroit downtown is really bustling and thriving. But unfortunately, the surrounding communities and neighborhoods around Detroit are not. So I wanted to create something that is benefiting them, which is a Detroit mobility service, as well as offering them a community gathering space. So I wanted to focus on this topic and this community of Detroit. So these were some of my sketches. I was in charge of designing the hub, which is the space interior, and my partner designed the vehicle that actually comes through my space. This is kind of the final direction that I came up to. It's called Harmony because it's kind of like encompassing like this exterior and interior space so that people can enjoy all aspects of it. And then this is some of the final renders. So this is actually the drive-through where the vehicle would come and pick up users. And this is where they would typically wait for the pod, but it's not only that, they can use it as a space to utilize for the community. So here are some shots of the exterior hub. It can be used for recreational activities such as music, art, and community events. And inside of the interior space, it just has some kiosks, which provide news about Detroit, and also you can order a ride from inside. And there's some seating lounge area as well. I also made an app where you can order a pod, view some news about Detroit, and also connect with some of your neighbors and peers around you. So there's a bulletin where you can communicate with each other. and a Harmony GPS so that you know where the closest Harmony hub is to you. My next project is
already 6 minutes just to give
okay.
you.
Okay. Nintendo EXP, which is just creating a new type of gaming experience for people. I like Nintendo because they're very family-based and friends. So I wanted to create another product for them. So the way I did it was taking the traditional display, which is how they divide the screen and the buttons, and then I tried merging them together into one surface. So this are some of my sketches, and here's kind of like the final sketch render that I did. So yes, it just has like an expanded screen. And with this, you would be able to have button interaction, which the buttons can glow and guide you through the game. This was some of my wireframing for some of the interface on how the buttons could work with an integrated screen. And these are just some final shots that I have of the front and back, and some colorways, and a final shot. And then for my last project, it is a work in progress. So I'm still working on it right now for this semester. So I created a watch wearable for this brand called Bond Touch. And I was really analyzing the current trend of society, which is the pandemic and how it's affecting people's relationships, causing people to feel lonely, isolated, and distanced. And there's a lot of different types of relationships who are affected, such as family, couples, and the elderly. So I found a product called Bond Touch, which kind of, in a way, solves these types of problems. It's a bracelet where you can connect with one another and send replications of touch, kind of just like a cool way to connect with people who are long distance from you. But there are issues with it. This is what it looks like on the right. And I believe that it has lacking beautiful design, and it looks like a Fitbit to me. So I held a market survey, which just proved to me right here that 90% of people would not purchase the product because they didn't like the current design. And 85% of people loved the concept and would consider purchasing it if the design was changed. So these are just some of my sketches. They're still kind of developing, but I ended up coming up with 3 different themes that I wanted to offer for this brand to produce. And this is what I came up with. So this is kind of like an exploded, or not exploded view. This is like a user interaction. So this touch body actually comes out of this frame, and you're able to switch it from different types of bracelets to fit different styles. And this is where you would touch to replicate the vibration patterns to communicate with people in your family or relationships. And this edge here is an infinity edge where you can pick a color spectrum and actually send a color along with that vibration, just to communicate whatever you want, whether it's like, I miss you or I love you, etc. To communicate the different types of themes that I was going for, I picked one of my inspirations to be inspired by a lotus pond. So this is just kind of like the package of it all. And then the next theme was inspired by topography. So I called it terrain. And this is kind of just like the inspiration of like the physical features of the earth. And then the last one is inspired by space. So this is the galaxy bracelet, and it's just really sleek and black. And the top face is inspired by the solar system. So yeah, so this project is still being in works, but it's to be continued. And yeah, that's the end of my portfolio. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis.
Okay, great. So Crystal and Craig, you had a kind of overview. I randomly select this, try to create a variety of to give an overview of what the students are doing at this level in this class. So now it's up to you to give some comments to what you have seen according to your experience.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Yeah, just a general comment to start off with. I mean, excellent work all around. I think one of the important things when we're going through these presentations, which I think you guys hit, was to show both the breadth and depth. So taking a little bit more time on one of the projects, considering an 8-minute request is pretty difficult. It's challenging to go through your portfolio in 8 minutes, but I think we've all been there and had that experience, whether that's, you know, even a project that you're working on, you have to show really quickly. So having your story down and having, you know, here's the hour-long version, here's the 8-minute version. But the way you all broke down a specific project and really showed your depth, but then, you know, zoomed through a couple other projects to just show that you have, you've worked on other things, and there's other things that, you know, we might be interested in if we were going to hire you, and we might want to spend more time with you. So you're showing both sides of the spectrum, both, you know, the variety of projects you have, but depth, I think, was pretty important and well done. I guess we can go through, unless you have a general.
Yeah, I have a few general. So yeah, first off, great job. It's definitely, like Craig said, 8 minutes is tough. But, you know, it's good practice. You have to be able to give the long version, but definitely the elevator pitch as well. I would say overall, making sure your portfolio is consistent from a graphic design perspective, and we can get more, you know, when we go into the detailed feedback, but I'd say that's really important. One of the things I did while I was at CCS is I actually took 2 graphic design courses, and I found that was very helpful for me as well, because it's just that one little extra touch that helps set your portfolio apart. And then overall, though, I'd say you guys both, or all 3 of you, spoke with ease and like not stress, and you spoke at a good rate, which is important. People get nervous, they tend to speak faster, and you can't really understand what they're saying. So I'd say good job there as well.
Yeah, you didn't condense a 15-minute presentation to 8 minutes, which that's when you just start speaking really quickly. So well done.
Yeah. And then the last general point, which again, we'll go into specifics with each person, but something that I was always told and I live by is that any work you create, whether it's your portfolio or it's a presentation for a company, has to be able to present without you there. So all information that someone would need to know should be located in those slides. You know, it's always a fine balance between loading the page with a ton of information, but making sure that if your deck gets passed off to someone else and you're not there to present it, that it can speak for itself is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because that does happen in a company where somebody will send out, like a manager who's doing the hiring will send out your portfolio to, you know, the senior managers, the managers who are on the teams, and you won't have a chance to present to them. It's just your portfolio doing all the work. So I would agree with Crystal to that point. Don't overload the page with content, but get your message across in the most succinct way possible. And sometimes that means some call outs and, you know, a short paragraph, but I think that is a pretty critical point.
Yeah. Right, you want to go in order?
Yeah, so Michaela, we can start with you. I'll start. So first of all, I want to say that you have some incredible insights. I love that you tie each of your projects to insights from a consumer or somebody who's using the product. I think that is so critical and shouldn't get overlooked in anybody's projects. If you can talk to people who are using the products, that's even better. Just having that storyline just uncovers so much, because each of us are only a data point of one. So when you go to develop out a project, if you use only your own data point and maybe even just the research online, I think it can be limiting. So having those conversations with people, I think, are so critical. But I love the insights that you brought to the table with your projects, especially kind of those safety aspects in the first project. I think were really important and a critical piece. So I would say great job there. And also telling that story too. I think you did that in a concise way. So I think that would be a good example of how you can tell that in limited words. So you're not overdoing the page, but you're kind of showing that storyline. So I think that's important. I think another thing I would say to help the portfolio would be to see some of those models in physical form. So you have some really great, large scale, they're all doable with various methods like the foam core models and that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see in that portfolio some of these models just either 3D printed or kind of built up. And if you have that already, I would take a quick picture of that and just throw that in there as well. Because I think it shows that you're taking it to that next level and kind of, showing how those parts interact together. I think that's such an important piece.
Sorry to interrupt. There is, in some cases, the pandemic did help that process.
Yeah.
Well, I did have mock-ups, and they were actually like, I had a whole page of like how I did my mock-ups and stuff. And then as far as like the physical model though, I was halfway there, and then we went back into virtual and stopped doing, we didn't have access to the shops or anything. So yeah. I did have a page of like more mock-ups. I did take that out just because that project was getting kind of lengthy, and I didn't know if it was important, but it's good to know that I should probably put those back in.
Yeah, even if it's just a small image of it and just showing that, hey, you did build it. Cause like even we're all getting Amazon boxes and stuff, or, you're getting shipments to the house and whatnot. So even using materials. So I actually had to do that for a client. Like, same thing. I couldn't go out and go pick up materials. So I ended up using Amazon boxes to mock something up, and it worked. It communicated the idea. So, finding a way to kind of, integrate that. And even if it's a small way and just a small image, just say like, if you want to talk about it further, I can show you those samples. So, but I would say from your standpoint, I was really happy with the way you built your insights into your project. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
I had a similar thing about the insights, but I was taking a different approach with it. Like I like that you focused on a relevant trend right now of like people going to smaller homes or like moving more towards city centers. So I think it's important to capitalize on, what's going on in the world right now. With the bed project, I would actually put your sketches earlier on, even though they weren't designs that you move forward with. It still shows your exploration early in the project, which I thought would be good to move it up. And the last thing is, you don't have to do this on all projects, and maybe it's just me being a CMF designer, but highlight the materials a little bit more in one of them. I think on the bed, maybe using lightweight materials and explaining why, or like going a little deeper into some of the materials, I think would be good as well. But Craig kind of covered all my other ones.
Thank you. That's great feedback. I actually was wondering about that bed sketch. Like I had just asked when I presented to someone if I thought I should put it further in the beginning, because it does seem to explain how I got to where I did.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Of course. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, the only other thing I had on here was the shoe. So thinking about, I think you had some nice shots of how those interact, or how you actually release the spikes. How did you go about that process of like uncovering the way that those spikes come out and that whole process? Do you have shoes on where you were kind of playing around with it physically, or? I
was actually in a class of the 3D class, and I welded a little mock-up of it, and I made like part of it, but I couldn't make the actual like lever part. But I made how the cleats the actual little spikes in the row.
Wow.
With like little metal spikes, and then put them in like just a piece of cardboard to mock up the rubber, and cut little slits. It wasn't pretty, so I didn't take pictures.
Doesn't matter. It's fine.
It was like really rough. But yeah, I had to speed up talking about it, but I was inspired by the way that brakes on skis work. And then I found a cheap little retractable hairbrush on Amazon and kind of took that apart. And that's how it came together.
Yeah, I would definitely show a big shout of that. Make it a full page. Don't be concerned that, something might be really rough. I think, we're all kind of seeing the Instagram visuals now where it's like these hot sketches and stuff. But when it comes to hiring, I'm looking for the down and dirty. Are you rolling up your sleeves? You were in the shop welding this stuff. Like that is phenomenal. And if I didn't know that, and somebody else showed that, I would have been all over their portfolio. So I would definitely include that.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. I actually really want to see that image. So if you could send it, I'd love to see how you put that together.
Sure. I'll definitely do that now.
Okay, John. John, oddly enough, we were in Saratoga this weekend, and I saw that you were in Ballston Spa, or Crystal pointed that out, which I thought was kind of funny. We were not too far away from you this weekend.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I would say, John, you had some incredible visuals. I think your portfolio, everything really stood out to me. And I did appreciate that you have some breadth. So you really tried both the ID work, but also you tried out UI. Oh, sorry, guys.
It happens.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I appreciate you tried the UI work as well as, the branding work, the branding elements, the industrial design. And I think that piece of it and showing the breadth and your interest there, I think is really interesting, especially for somebody in the consulting space. Because like I said earlier, you do have to wear a lot of hats, and sometimes you do have to play roles in, everything from UI to branding. So I think that's helpful if that's the direction you do want to head. I think just spending a little bit more time on, the storyline from an ID standpoint and why you made certain decisions, I think would be really helpful in the portfolio. So for instance, in the speaker project, the first one you had up, there was the one sketch page. You said, here are the sketches, and then you moved on. I'd really love to know, the process behind how did you select the images that you selected that inspired you, but then also what was the form development and what were you thinking about in terms of the space that these would live in? So really spending more time in the industrial design space and understanding kind of what your process was there, I think would be really helpful. But on the flip side, I also really like that Nike project where you really simplified the story. So that's also a good example of how you can tell the story without overdoing it on content. For instance, that page we just showed some of the older Nikes and like which components you're pulling out and which design elements you're using to inspire you in this next project, I think is nice. I would just really go more in depth into your ID process. Why did you make certain decisions? Same thing with the playground. Why did you choose certain components on the equipment?
Yeah, and to build on that, to my point earlier about making sure the presentation or the deck can stand on its own without you there. It's as simple as adding bullet points to like the material pages. Why were those materials chosen? Why were those colors chosen? What about your inspiration imagery on the playground project were you drawn to? Because you did a really great job of telling us when you were presenting it, but just putting that down on the page will be really important so that way it can speak when you're not there. But I agree, the breadth of work was really great. But just adding some of the depth I think would be good. But yeah, you took most of mine. So.
Sorry, you go first with Alexis. Yeah, just one more thing too, is like on the playground, for instance, you had the slide, the monkey bars, the swing, and you were kind of building this aesthetic story that you had, here's what's existing on the market, and here's why you want to transform it was, for an aesthetic reason. But I think moving past that to the next level too, is say it's not only the aesthetic, it's also here's why, I integrated the monkey bars. It's because, monkey bars have been proven to help kids with, both their physical strength and, mobility, this kind of thing. So I think telling those stories of why you selected those things, adding a tic-tac-toe, play area on that and doing it in a modern way to help with both the mental and the physical. So things like that, I think kind of help build the overall story too. So just telling the story as to why, I think is important. But nice work, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, to be fair, to give comments to Alexis, Crystal should be first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Thanks, Vincenzo. So Alexis, great job. I really love the portfolio and the projects that you selected to cover. I think overall, like again, going back to graphic design, your graphics of your portfolio were really good because they were consistent. So even though you have different projects, it looked like one portfolio, which is important. A small detail, but what I really liked is that you had the navigation in the top left corner. So, and you follow a similar cadence or layout every single project. So you had like your insights or the data, and then you had like, you know, the inspiration. But I liked that the person who's viewing the portfolio kind of knows where you're at in the process, and visually seeing that, it's really simple and subtle, but I think it's a really great thing to add, that navigation at the top. I also like that you showed the insights and you showed data, especially on your last project and the first project as well. You know, like really diving into what the insight is, what the unmet need is, and being really clear and concise about it, but all that information was there. On the last project, I love that you had like a market survey to really get the consumer's perspective. And I think that's really important as designers, is to show that you have that empathy and to show that you're immersing yourself in whatever problem that you're trying to solve is really, really important. You know, it's always good to have the aesthetics, but I think to be a great designer, having that insight, the meat behind it, the why is really important. Yeah, so great setting up the problem statement as well in the beginning. So, you know, clearly stating what the problem is and then going into your process was really great. And then the only other thing is the Detroit hub. I would say if there was people you had talked to, or showing more of the community involvement would be really good, you know, for that project. But let's see, what else did I have? The last project, again, I think it was really good, capitalizing on a current trend as well. As designers, we need to stay relevant and solve not just the problems of today, but the problems of the future. So, you know, there's going to be, I think, a big mental impact from the pandemic and what's been going on. So I think you solving that, or at least putting attention to it, is really great. And yeah, that was everything I had. But good job.
You're right. It's not easy to go second.
Always go first.
Yeah, I guess always go first. That's tip. So some of the points that I had written down, I want to second what Crystal said about the insights. I think you had some nice stories, and you're pulling from relevant, trend-worthy insights to develop out your products. So I think that was important, and you told a really nice story. One of the things that I think across the board too, I've been seeing as a trend in the way that designers present, is adding these kind of these shots of almost advertising-like pages in your portfolio. That's something we actually have been doing quite a bit in you know, the development world. So I think that's something that's really important, and you all really added these in, especially Alexis, your project with Bond. You know, having those shots at the end where you're talking about terrain and really showing the entire product together, and also creating a mood around that. It helps communicate really quickly the aesthetic you're going for and the entire story in a very concise way, because marketing has to do that. All the advertising that you see is, you know, very quick. You have, you know, a half a second to catch somebody's attention. So if you think about that and build a portfolio slide around it, which each one of you actually did, I think is really helpful, and something we've been doing quite a bit in the product world. So kudos to that.
Yeah, it's really important once you go to work at a corporation, because you will have to work with marketing and salespeople, and it's hard for a lot of them to make the mental leap to see your concept. So if you can talk in their language, which sometimes it's an ad, sometimes it's like the final story shot, or, you know, like any way you can use to communicate why you're doing what you're doing will only benefit you. And I think, again, like that 3 portfolio, having that process and the ability to be able to do that goes a long way, especially in corporations.
Yeah. And then one other thing too, Alexis, I think would be awesome to see is all of your projects, which I think is kind of interesting, except for the bond, all have this opportunity of scalability. And telling that story, I think, could be really nice for your portfolio, just because that's something we see a lot in the real world too. As you're developing products, you sometimes create a visual brand language for a single product, but then you have to scale it. So I worked on, for instance, a coffee maker. There's always kind of this high-end premium coffee maker, or you might have a coffee maker that has to be sold to Bed Bath & Beyond. It can't be the same as the one that's sold in Williams-Sonoma. So having that differentiation and scalability within a project, I think, is a really nice story that companies would be interested in hearing. And your projects in particular, I think, could really do that, especially, the city hub. You could do kind of different sizes for different areas. And I think that could be a really fun and nice build for your project.
Yeah, thank you so much for the feedback.
Overall,
thank you so much.
Great job to everyone.
I have a quick question. So when what do you suggest when you go to interview? It's important to have a PDF or a website that can be suitable.
The website for applying, I found, is critical. When I go to the interview and I present, I always have a PDF because
what happened? Something happened with the sound. I don't know if it's your side, our side.
Oh, can you still hear us?
Okay, try now.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds a little staticky to me too.
Okay, so.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, it's pretty weird how your voice arrived to us. I don't know if something happened if you touch anything.
It's just a PC.
Very good. Now it works.
It works.
When I'm dissing PCs over Macs, that's why.
Yeah.
No, it's on a Dell right now, so I don't know.
Okay, now it works. Okay, so to the client website is fine. Interview, you always suggest a PDF.
Yeah, PDF.
Yeah, because I always have tech issues. Either PowerPoint's crashing or InDesign doesn't want to load. So PDF's like always the go-to that without fail will always work. And I back it up. I put it on my laptop. I put it on a flash drive, and I have backups with me at the interview.
Very good. And Crystal, you mentioned that consistent graphic design through the portfolio. Can you articulate something more? And the fact that you took the two communication, now graphic design is called communication classes. Can you articulate more about this, the consistency?
Yeah, because it's all about your brand image, right? So having, your work speak is really important, and eliminating any changing graphics or anything that detracts from them focusing on your work. And I think it also shows the ability to look at the bigger picture and to look at consistency and be able to drive into depth with each project as well. I really appreciate, and maybe it's just me, but I appreciate a portfolio that has great graphic design because it allows the work to speak. It's not too cluttered and it's not too plain, and it definitely is finding the right balance. And, even though it's technical, communication design is a different discipline, that doesn't mean you can't learn from it. And, having the ability to have access to all that at CCS, use it to your advantage. You might as well, because you don't always get that throughout your career.
Perfect. A case study that I show quite often to the students is the portfolio of Mike Harmon. You remember him?
I'm trying to remember.
He graduated in 2010, so probably more or less your time. But anyway, was also the last one that was able to win the Students' Merit Award IDSA, believe it or not.
Gotcha.
So very well organized, consistent. In the 7 minutes, he did a good job. And I'm still showing that because it's a great case studies anyway, and also validated from a big jury that are professional at the IDSA.
Yeah, I think what's happened right now too is just something we talked about a little bit earlier, but this idea that we're all on Instagram, looking at the visuals, the hot sketch and everything, but I think it overshadows because not a lot of people are posting the rough sketches that you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis while you're doing the design work, or those really rough models that just communicate a single idea. Those are really, really valuable and help the overall process. And the hot sketch, sometimes you can't even do it for a project because you just don't have the time. You're building the CAD, you might do a couple of renderings in KeyShot to present it. But some projects, to Crystal's point too, is that they're moving so quick now that the hot sketch is not always what's most important. It's that entire process, and sometimes those things are ugly, but they communicate an idea, and in that light, they're beautiful. So it's important to show that, and I think some of that kind of gets lost, especially with this new Instagram, like create the hot sketch and show that off.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
it's one of my concerns. That is not the science. To have something cool and have like on Instagram is not what we do. Thank you for.
Yeah, and that's another side of it too. Instagram, there's this idea of publicity and getting your name out there, but focus on this, getting your job and getting that internship, or moving and advancing in your career, and that's always something that could be come down the road, but spend most of your time on developing your process, because that's what you're going to spend most of your time doing in the real world.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I don't want to abuse of your time. There is a question, of course, I was expecting from Daniel that I can see.
Okay.
Daniel, go for it. You were very quiet so far.
I wanted to ask two questions, but the first one is relating to what you were talking about right now. So with previous guests that we have had in this class, they have brought up the point of having kind of a reverse portfolio. So showing that attention grabbing shot first, and then kind of getting them intrigued, and then kind of folding out your process and how you got to that final shot. So that's kind of how I develop my portfolio, and then I have a PDF portfolio that has the normal story, where you started and then the end result. Is there any, I guess, benefit that you, or certain situations that you would consider that helpful or beneficial, and others that maybe not so much, having that reverse type of portfolio?
Yeah, it's funny because Nate, who's the senior vice president of design at Newell, was always adamant about just stop with the just show me your end conclusion and then show me the process. So he was a big believer in that reverse portfolio. But at the same time, I've had to adapt, based on who the audience is. And when it comes to your portfolio, I think it's good to follow that. I'd be careful not to show them too much up front, because, it's show them that end concept, but then right away go into how you got there. Because that is very important when you're getting hired on. I think when you go to work at a company, it's just part of the learning experience, and you learn the marketing teams that you might have to present to. You learn how to communicate with them, how you want to lead them, or what's the best way to lead them through the story. And so it's just trial and error. You're not going to get it right every time, but I think it's really learning the team that you're working with and what works best for them and getting your story across. But I don't know if you had a different experience.
No, I 100% agree. I think in pop culture now, I think we've all grown up in the age of the HGTV grand unveil at the end, and the people show up and they see their final product at the very end after kind of going through this whole process. But I think in reality, it works very different. I think showing up front the final product, to Crystal's point, not giving too much away, but if you have a really nice rendering of a product, give them, you want honey for the bees. It's the flower. It's something that is going to attract you to learn more and to really engage and figure out how you got there. So
people have short attention spans. So a lot of times, they'll just, your whole presentation, they'll be thinking about, okay, what's the end thing? What's the solution? Whereas if you just give it to them, it frees their brain up to really focus on why you arrived at that. which is why the reverse works.
Yeah. No, I think that's accurate. So I would definitely agree with them. And you had a second question, Dan?
Yeah. So pretty much in the CCS hallways, we always we still have, I believe, one of your projects that you submitted to IDS, what is it, the IDSA?
Oh yeah, IDEA
for the like emergency relief housing. And so I was just gonna ask, with that sort of mentality, I'm very interested in having projects that have more of the social and environmental impact tied into it, and the possibility to apply them to these sort of competitions. Is there a sort of process you followed, or was this kind of a thing that happened afterwards that you applied it because it just happened to meet the requirements or meet the qualifications?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think having and pulling and drawing on your life experiences as a designer, especially in your career, or in your college years, you're kind of learning and exploring the process. And at that time with the TED project, that was right after Katrina, and one of the IDSA meetings with actually the national conference was down in New Orleans. So I actually got to tour the area and see where the destruction occurred. I also talked to architects during that project. So drawing on the overall community that you've either engaged with or spoke to, and trying to pull that into a project the best you can, because we all have life experiences that we could pull from and draw from. And I think that just speaks volumes, because it gives you a way to, have those conversations with the end user early on in your career, early on in your college career, when you don't necessarily have access to individuals like Crystal and I do at big companies that go out and do this on a daily basis, where they're going out and drawing user information, user data. But we all have those experiences we can draw from. And so that was what I was trying to do with the TED project was, what have I done in the past? I've been to that location where Katrina hit hard in New Orleans. There was some architects I could speak to about, the costs and kind of pulling this project together. What would it take? And having those conversations, I think, is like so critical for designers. We have to engage with the community and really learn from others, and not try to just come up with the idea that we have, the first exciting idea we have. It might be good, but test that. I keep saying it, but it's a data point of one. Your ideas are just your own data point, and you ask one other person, it's going to be a different piece of information that you can use, and it's going to help you move forward.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is one of the things that I always try to consider and it's struggle with, because it adds a lot of time and process, because you can't just force all these things to happen. It requires your dedication and your presence to actually get this important points in your project, and that kind of helps a little bit how you get there and how that can be possible within our major. I think that's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do want to say before we wrap up too that Chris and I are open to meeting up with anybody who, I know we were only able to review 3 portfolios today, but we want to extend the offer to anybody who wants to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to do the same type of review with any of you. So take advantage of it. We'll send our contact information and reach out, and would love to see your portfolios too, and give you some feedback and hear what you have to say.
I would actually really like that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for this. Thank you, Craig, and Crystal too. It's nice, and you will have a feedback from 2 professionals, not 1.
2 for the personal one.
Yeah.
So this was amazing. I hope everyone appreciate this meeting today. We want to see reaction on the screen. It's always nice to have.
Yeah, thank you for your time today.
I put the fireworks. That
means you all.
So thank you so much for sharing your insight. You are doing great career, great couple, brilliant future, I suppose. And if you need advice, you know how this can last forever, I can give you some. But I think that everybody I really appreciate your contribution. I really appreciate what I showed you in the past and what you are doing. And I told you that your board is still in the hallway at school. You know, when there is a great example, it's a kind of timeless. So, and I like to repropose it. It's like the portfolio done by Mike Harmon. It's a great example, and they can last for a long time till when someone else is doing something better that is not there yet. So this is why they are there, but it will be changed soon. So thank you so much. And we will stay in contact, and you will receive some requests from the students. I can see you posted your email in the chat.
Yep.
And if there is something else, we can go, we can say
thank you all.
Again.
This has been great.
You all. It's been a lot of fun.
To the next time.
Yeah. Well done, everybody.
Thank you.
For your advice.